Walking into Retirement, an unusual podcast about finding purpose, meaning, and balance after a busy working life, with David Ailing Smith and Peter Taylor. Exploring the emotional, psychological, and practical realities of modern retirement through a series of reflective conversations undertaken whilst walking scenic routes across the UK.
Hello, Peter.
Hello, Daz. Here we are, number 5.
Yeah, it's good. I enjoyed the last one. Did you like the last one?
I did. It was very enjoyable. It was based on a wonderful, wonderful book, and I'm looking forward to our next one, of course, as well.
Big hill, though, wasn't it? Broadway. I mean, it was. You were panting a bit. Do you mind me saying that?
We were taking me up a Welsh mountain next, so goodness knows what's going to happen.
That's true. But we've had some nice feedback. I appreciated that. As we talked about some of the dilemmas that some people may come across in retirement. So, I think we're touching a nerve with our listener.
We're gaining traction. I think that's where we are.
Yes, and a couple of people have asked me, Peter, how best to interact with us. And so, what's the best answer to that thing? Where can people find us?
Well, I mean, first of all, obviously, I'm sure you can work this out. There's someone who's listening to these instructions. They found us already, but that's a bit facetious, I know, but stuck in that one. Look, we have a website, www.walkingintoretirement.com. You can also say the Alexa word. I'm being careful because I'm trying not to wake mine up. You can say play Walking Into Retirement podcast, for example. We're on YouTube, we're on Apple, we're on Spotify, Amazon Music, Podcast Addict, Podchaser, Player FM, and all other good podcasting channels out there. And of course, we're on LinkedIn as well. And if people just want to contact us or reach out to us, we'll happily send the direct link to them, of course, as well.
Well, that's great. Yeah, actually, we've had a couple of nice comments about people offering topics as well, which I think we're going to be coming back to in subsequent episodes. And we're running with this theme, aren't we, Peter? That we'll have a walk one week, and then we'll talk about a theme, and then a following week we'll have a guest, and we'll have a bit more of a deep dive into something that's come up on a previous chat. And this week's a guest week, of course, which is very exciting. So
yes,
we will reveal our guest in a minute. But the topic, Peter, for this week is identity. And
yes,
this has come up a couple of times. So what's your thoughts about this, Peter, as a topic?
I think it's a good one, actually, because it is a way that you measure yourself. I mean, we have lightly touched on, perhaps we should go deep at some point when we're both comfortable, but we've lightly touched on your transition into elderescence or through elderescence, and I'm kind of flirting with the very edges of it, etc. And that is one of the things that I think is a big concern. Is what is your identity on the other side of that vortex or black hole or whatever you want to describe it? Is what becomes your identity when you've moved on?
Yeah, well, I mean, perhaps, I'd like to just broaden it a bit. And I think, for many people who, broadly speaking, have loved their job or the organization they work for, perhaps, have been defined to some extent by what they do. I think this work persona, this identity, can be who they are, or perhaps it is who they are to the people around them, or perhaps even, who they think they are. So I think it gets formed at work. And we talked last week a little bit about how some of those habits at work are a bit counterintuitive when you move away from work. They don't actually help you with the work that you do that follows. And, when thinking about stepping away from a job, I think questions surface for people, like you've just said, for whatever reason, and it raises real questions of identity. And I think, for me, entering elderescence just has led to some reflection about identity. And I'd like to give you a quote, Peter, from the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. Do you know him? Are you a fan of his work?
Not personally, no, but I've heard of him, obviously.
The quote, one of his most famous quotes is, "What doesn't kill us makes us stronger," which...
that's him, was it? Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was him. That's him. But he talks about to become who you are. And I thought that was a really nice way to frame, perhaps, the opportunity that we all have when we enter elderescence. And he also talks about it as being not just an act of discovery, discovering who you are after. He wasn't actually talking about retirement particularly, but I think it works. An act of discovery and creation. And I really like that. The fact that one of the benefits of retirement, and we really should do one of our podcasts on the benefits of retirement, Peter, is an opportunity to both discover or create who you are. And so I'd like to follow through on those ideas with our guest. And so can I welcome Sadie, a friend to the the podcast we had previously, The Squid of Despair, and now with us into Walking into Retirement. So hello, Sadie, nice to talk to you again.
Hello, Daz. Hello, Peter. Thanks for having me back. It's lovely to be reconnected with you.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. And people who have listened to us before may know Sadie's a friend of ours, is a coach who partners with executive women. I've seen some of the work you've done more recently, Sadie, Breaking Through Limits, that masterclass with your executives and executive presence for women. Really impressed with that sort of work. And in fact, there was a quote from something you wrote recently, which made me think about wanting to talk to you about this topic. And if I could just quote you for a moment, Sadie, you said that when leadership transitions, most leadership transitions don't fail because of poor strategy. They stall because of identity. When the title falls away, a deep question emerges: who am I without it? And this is the work that most people avoid. And I thought that was really interesting. And I know, well, I'd love to ask you about that in terms of where did that phrase come from? When do you think that is relevant for retirement? So, yeah, welcome, Sadie. So that quote, when the title falls away, a deep question emerges, who am I without it? Can you give me a bit more background to that? I wasn't sure which of where that came from in your work.
Yeah, so I think that was drawn from a workshop, a masterclass, a session, whatever you want to call it, that I did quite recently with a group of executives who are going through this transition, either chosen or forced transition, where they have been very senior in their organization, C-suite executives, and now for some reasons they are forced to be facing either looking for another job or just deciding what the next chapter of their life is going to bring. And these are people that have never had to really think about it before, never really had to face it before. They've worked hard, they've had long tenured, successful careers, and now they are in a place which is incredibly uncomfortable for them. So I ran this session for them to help, I guess, really to help unpick this question about, if I'm not this anymore, then who am I? It's a very challenging time for people, and I can relate to this personally as well. And whether it's through career transition or whether it's retirement, either chosen retirement, forced retirement, it doesn't, underneath it all, the experience is similar, because I think what people often experience at that point, when one day they had a lot of structure, a lot of, purpose, if you like, in their daily lives, it quite quickly transitions to a loss of feeling relevant. Do I still matter? If I don't have this corporate job, am I still relevant in the world? I think that's a really big one. That came to me in a flash when I remember kind of, walking around my kitchen thinking, why am I feeling so lost here? I just don't feel relevant anymore. That's scary. So at the heart of it, it kind of taps into our fears about no longer being relevant, no longer mattering. And then I think the other aspect of it, if I'm not doing this anymore, then who am I? It's this loss of structure. So what do I do with my time? How do I fill my days? How do I know whether I'm being kind of productive or quote valuable? And then this also this loss of confidence. Am I still capable of doing what I thought I was here to do? And if I'm not, what can I do? What should I do? And so all this leaves us really disorientated for a while. And so, as I said, whether it's retirement, whether it's, I think, any key transition, that's where I've been really tapping into supporting individuals in helping them not only understand the answer to that question, who am I? It's then also, who do I want to be in this next chapter of my life? What is this season here to offer me? And how do I find meaning in this next season, this next chapter? And it is so powerful because we have just not been asking ourselves those questions. We aren't taught to. Society, the corporate environment doesn't ever ask us to think about who we are or what we want. It really conditions us to focus on being productive and what we kind of quote unquote should be doing.
Well, yeah.
So I'll pause there for a second.
Well, I was going to make a point there. About, we've joked in the past about the gold watch was for people. A lot of people was all of the sort of mental support and guidance they needed to move into retirement, and then there was nothing at all. But going back to what you said, Sadie, I mean, I'm thinking, do you feel then that perhaps people who have the strongest work identities tend to find this transition significantly harder? There's a kind of correlation there.
Yeah, I mean, I do, based on my the samples that I've been exposed to, yeah, I do. And I use my dad as one of them. And I think generationally, we might look back at our parents who, their whole sense of worth has been tied to contribution, performance, impact, in their work environment. And then for some reason that stops. And you look around and go, well, how do I create impact in the world now? What do I care about now? Because people who are very dedicated and committed to their work, they care. It matters. Yeah. And so if you take away something that people care about, that matters to them, it leaves a big void. So if you are somebody who is less, I don't know, career focused, and you have a lot of richness outside of your life, so you have other passions, other I'm not going to say hobbies, I really don't like that word, hobbies, but other things that really light you up, whether it's in community, whether it's in self-development, whether it's in the arts, whatever it is. If you have that pull, that gravitational pull in a different direction, it almost frees you up to explore and experiment with other areas of your life that you've been interested in.
Yeah, you're touching on so many points that have come up in our conversations already, Sadie. And I'm interested whether you see a gender difference here. I know you focus on executive women, but the phrasing you use is the relevancy, the disorientation, the impact to the world. They're all things that I would recognize, as a recently retired man. We have talked in the past about the fact that women, unlike men, sometimes have long career breaks relative to having a child. And I wonder whether that actually, does that prepare women for this, or does it make it worse because there's another identity there with which they're juggling?
So, in answer to your first question, is there a gender difference? I think at the very heart of it, I'll say, this is my opinion, I'll say no. Like, those questions around relevance and all of that still apply. But I think there is nuance between, what women experience and what men experience. And that's just because I think of the way that gendered roles are established in our society. So, still men are the majority breadwinners, earners, those that go out and work outside of the home. And then there are a higher percentage of women who don't work outside of the home, who stay, in and care for their families. And so I could equate it in some respects. So I'll start here. If a parent, a mother who doesn't work outside of the home, when her children leave home and she becomes an empty nester, that's a really big transition point for her. When so much of her life has been dedicated to raising the children and, being the parent, and then she's no longer needed in that capacity. That's when I see kind of transition points and struggles, if you like, around, contribution and value and meaning. With women in the workplace, what I'm seeing here is it's what I'm seeing is less about retirement. I'm seeing this shift, and it's proving out in the data. If you look, there are more and more women leaving corporate environments than ever before, and that's across the age spectrum. And if I look at people in women at midlife age, there are more women leaving because they're just realizing, actually, this doesn't feel like success to me. So they're taking a somewhat proactive approach to looking at their lives and saying, well, hang on, I was told I could have it all, the family, the career, etc. And what was meant to be successful on paper doesn't feel like that. I feel like I've compromised so much. I feel like my worth isn't valued. And actually, I'm at this point in my life where I don't know that I want the next chapter to look like this and feel like this. I want to feel more fulfilled. I want to feel more like successful on my own terms, not by how everybody else is telling me I should live. So I'm seeing these two different dynamics in women and their sort of experience of transition. And with men, I think it is definitely associated very strongly with this work identity and who am I if I'm not this professional individual. So again, generalizations, but that's my lived experience.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. And I'd like to just go back on following up on Peter's question about, do you feel that the individuals you've worked with that have had the particularly more senior jobs are particularly predisposed to this sort of challenge? And I wonder whether, do you think that is because their I'm just going to give a basket of indicators here. Their work ethic, their drive, their enthusiasm, their hunger for success is strong with them, and therefore these are all the things that are most noticeably absent when they leave work. So I'm wondering whether is it their character, the personality type that causes this, do you think, or is there something else going on here?
I think it's definitely a key part of it. So, executives, senior people who have dedicated really their lives to their careers and driving for results and delivering, people who get to that level tend to be high performing individuals, very committed, very dedicated, very motivated by the work that they're doing. They're not checked out, they're not passive. They have to be very actively involved in the work that they're doing every day. They feel it gives them a sense of purpose and connection. It rewards them in ways that matter to them. So it might be financial, that might be a big part of it. But it also might be they're rewarded by the ability to impact a large organization or to lead a team. And so when those things which are deeply sort of ingrained in their value system, when they're taken away and not replaced thoughtfully, then it's a vacuum. And that's why, I love hearing about phased retirements, planned retirement. In fact, I think to just question the whole word retirement. I think it's an antiquated expression that the meaning has actually changed. So, what it used to mean is, people would, it was defined kind of by your age. So when you get to 60 or 65, you quote unquote retire. It used to be very linear. You'll work this way, you'll go up, you'll go up, you'll go up, and then you'll finish. And it was, very final. It was you retire and then you rest. All these, you've earned the right to stop. But nobody wants to stop. People don't want to just stop. They want to continue. They want to.
It's elderescence, isn't it, Sadie?
I knew you were going to come in that with Daz. That was a perfect intro to your word, elderescence.
Thank you, Sadie.
So well done.
You may have heard that we, invented this word because I, like you, did not like the sort of the binary nature of the phrase retirement, and so elderescence for me, like adolescence and matrescence, was describing a process that we go through, which is more gradual. And one of becoming rather than stopping.
Exactly.
So no, thank you, Sadie, for helping me support this word, because Peter's not really a fan.
I am a fan.
it's how you look at life, right? We used to look at life in a very linear way. Well, we still do. In many respects, people are looking at their lives as a line from start to finish. And in fact, in reality, our life is a series of loops, of circles. It's like I think of it like a sort of a spiral that goes upwards, because constantly changing, we're constantly evolving and growing, and we go through these seasons of our lives that in every single stage there is a different purpose to it, and different focus on it. Things matter to us in a different way. And so there's a guy called James Hollis who wrote a book called Finding the Half of Life, which I recommend anybody read. It really helps us understand how what we used to strive for in our early part of our life, which was achievement, meeting our goals, getting the house, the car, the kids, the salary, the promotion, they start to matter very differently to us in the second half of our life, where things become much more about who am I, who am I apart from all the roles that I hold in my life, what's my soul asking of me right now. It becomes much more sort of existential and spiritual, and a period of self-discovery. And I think that the people that choose to look at this and intentionally allow themselves the space to explore these questions, they're the people that have very rich experiences in the second half of their life, rather than those that feel like they're band-aids ripped off.
I'd really like to follow up on that, actually, because I think I'd like to take this conversation with that fantastic sort of introduction there into my Nietzsche quote, to become who you are. It's not a simple slogan. I think it's actually a complex philosophical challenge. It's not just be yourself. He talked about it's active creation, not just passive discovery through continuous effort. And I think you're saying that, aren't you, Sadie? That, and I'd like to propose that actually one of the huge benefits of retirement, which we've not talked about yet, I don't think, Peter, is this opportunity to become who you are. To become the best version of yourself you can be. And I sort of feel that that's the work you're doing with your executive women, Sadie.
Yeah, it and I would say that to do that, to do that work takes a level of awareness that not many people have, and so that it needs a catalyst of some description. So as we go into these different stages of our lives, knowing that this is an opportunity that's offering us something, but knowing that we can't necessarily do it all by ourselves. We're going to get stuck. We're going to get stuck in these old patterns, these old beliefs that we have around, well, I'm only valuable if I'm being productive, or I only matter if I've got, if I'm earning money, for example. There's all these beliefs that are still going to be there. And those are the things we need help in working through and unpicking and redesigning. And that's exactly the support that people going through this need. And I honestly don't know how much support people get when they're moving through this elderescence phase. I don't know what exists for them.
Perfect usage of that term. Thank you. No, I think that, I know this is a focus of yours, but this active creation, I think it is about overcoming these internalized values, trying to liberate yourself from those norms that you've been told are, who you should be. And I know you spent a lot of time on that. But it's not easy work, is it? It requires discipline, willpower. And there's something here about, which makes me feel positive about it, that, that willpower and drive that people who have enjoyed their work miss when they stop working, it's got an opportunity here to be perhaps pointed towards this quest to try and understand how do they speak to their values more, perhaps how they generate new values that they can create given their change in circumstance and the time they've got available to them. So, but you made the point, say, this is not easy work, is it?
No, and the heart of what you're saying there is this question about, what does success mean to me now? Like, success has looked a certain way for me my whole life. And now it has to look different. And I get the opportunity to create that in a way that really is resonant to me. It's hard work, especially. And one of the other things I think it takes, as well as like determination, is vulnerability. People who are willing to embrace this next chapter of their life, I think, need to be willing to be very vulnerable about the things that are hard for them, about the things they love, about the things they're scared of, about the things that excite them, what their desires are, what their what their worries are. We want it to all get out there on the table. I think of it like cleaning a kitchen cupboard. You have to get everything out first before you can make it sort of look and organized in the way that you really want it to.
We like a
metaphor.
Check
the sell-by date on some of the things in the cupboard. Yes.
Exactly. No, you're spot on. So how many, herbs have you got that are like 2020 sell-by date? It's funny. That's a really great analogy as well, because we do. There are things that are no longer valuable to us, that we've carried around for a long time, that were given to us, that we have to be honest about. It's not here to serve me anymore. It's not giving me any flavor in my life anymore. I need to let this one. I need to chuck this one away.
No, this is going to run and run, Sadie. I like this. I'm going to look forward to that analogy appearing on a future masterclass where you talk about the herbs and spices in your cupboard.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. My sister actually sent me a picture the other day of one. She said, "Do you think it's all right?" And it was the 2020 expiry date. And I was like, nah, you're not going to get anything out of that.
When we moved, a couple of years ago when we moved, it was embarrassing as we went through them thoroughly, and it's oh my goodness me. But so, can I ask a question to kind of align to this, if I may, in the sense that, do you think then the problems, the challenges, the difficulties people have of accepting retirement is that all they know is trying to put up a battle to retain the identity they've had, as opposed to freeing themselves to consider the identity they could have, or expanding that identity?
Yeah, I do, and I think it's not their fault. And what I mean by that is, there are systems that we operate in, that we live in these, whether it's the UK or the US, there are messages that are sent to us, intentionally and unintentionally, about who is worthy and who is not worthy. And, if you are no longer a productive member of the working environment, there isn't much telling you that you matter, that you still have an important role to play in this world. And so while we can do all the inner work we want around our identity and what this next chapter brings up for us and what we want to do, what our values are and all of that, if we're still going to be sort of pushing against those beliefs, those societal beliefs that we don't matter as much as other people do. And that's something we can't necessarily control. So, I think this work is about understanding within those systems and those kind of power structures and those capitalist corporate beliefs, where do we have agency to create a meaningful second half of our life, or third part of our life rather. Where do we have agency within that to design it in a way that matters to us, regardless of what society's messages are? And I think it's really important to state that, because it can sound a bit simplistic to say, well, you just need to do the work and then you'll be fine. Yeah, and also you're going to hear, people just start to pass you by, and that hurts. And so I don't know. I think it's something as a society that we have to be more active in recognizing that we do have an aging population, and these people matter. They have value to contribute. They have experience and wisdom to share with others, and we have to listen to that. So that's what I think.
Thank you. And I mean, that's where that sort of the elder of the elderescence came from. We sort of like that construct, that actually there was wisdom associated with a life well lived that has value to folks that are at different stages of their life. And I think one of the things I think Peter and I have spotted as we spoke to people and as we've talked, it's a very personal journey, this, for everybody. And so also very cognizant that a lot of the things we talk about won't resonate with people because it's not their story. And that's something to do with their upbringing, isn't it? It's something to do with their personal strengths, their aspirations, their life's journey. And so but I'm quite excited about the fact that, you know, perhaps elderescence is an almost unique opportunity for self-development, you know, like adolescence and matrescence, you know, a big transitional point in people's lives, which one could talk about it superficially in terms of having more time to fulfill your interest and hobbies. I'll use that that word in that way, Sadie, to sort of downplay it. But actually, it also gives you the opportunity to do this harder work, which I'm sure is ultimately going to be more fulfilling and more rewarding for people. So perhaps it's a really, really, really exciting time for people. And perhaps we can sort of close on that, that this is a moment when people can not just be themselves, but become the best version of themselves they can be.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful way to frame it. It is such an opportunity here that that people are being offered to ask themselves the question, in this next stage of my life, what could be possible for me?
Yes.
And reframing it in terms of possibility and opportunity. And I think that's very powerful.
Yes, I agree. Thank you so much, Sadie. I'm conscious of our time. Peter, I don't know if there's any more final reflections from you, but it feels like a very good discussion on identity, on what it was and what it could be.
Yeah, no, it's a great one. Thank you, Sadie. And you know, I briefly looked up something about the kind of the four types of identity. There's personal identity, role identity, social identity, and collective identity. And you know, if you think about that, I'm stopping working. If you take that part of it, then you know, perhaps your personal identity retains as it was, but your role fundamentally changes. Your social identity shifts. You might have had two parallel social worlds, and collectively it will also change it. So you can see how this really does impact that whole broad subject of identity. So, you know, we appreciate you taking us through it and sharing some of your thoughts.
Thank you, Sadie, and looking forward to the spice and herb analogy making its way into the universe at some point in the future.
Oh yeah,
you heard it here first.
Okay, thanks both. Enjoyed the conversation.
All right.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You have been listening to Walking into Retirement, an unusual podcast about finding purpose, meaning and balance after a busy working life with David Ailing Smith and Peter Taylor. Find out more at www.walkingintoretirement.com, and why not share your own retirement stories with the hosts?